Alright, so I'm going to take a minute to talk about showing versus telling in a piece of media. So this interpretation is coming mostly from a consumer standpoint. Growing up was a self-proclaimed media snob. I enjoyed having strong opinions on stories and how and why they're told the way that they are. I am now working on a graphic novel called Mana Age, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Showing versus telling, it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. It is probably one of the biggest things that I look for in any piece of media, like its ability to take me through an experience. So what is showing versus telling? So I define it as quite literally taking your reader through the circumstances that you could otherwise explain through text or dialogue. So any version of verbally or directly explaining an element of your story or handing information to the viewer as opposed to showing them examples of it or giving them story beats or plot beats to figure out the element you're trying to get across, seeing the elements transpire and allowing them to come to their own conclusions, or I guess giving them the opportunity to infer. So why is it valuable? I think that essentially showing versus telling has two major goals, either creating an atmosphere or creating significance or depth for your plot. So what that means, like creating an atmosphere, so if you are trying to get specific impressions of a character across, the piece of media could either tell the reader directly or the viewer. I don't know why I say reader. I can't read. I don't read books. I can read. I watch animation. I read comics. I like pretty pictures. So, getting specific elements across to the viewer. If the viewer needs to know that somebody is attractive, right, or if it's important that other people are scared of them, you could either have other people talk about how menacing a antagonist is, how uncomfortable they make somebody describing an awful experience they had with them, right? Like the fear that they've derived from these interactions. You could telling versus showing is more so them just describing how awful and terrible and scary it was to talk to this guy, versus showing is like maybe they withhold words, maybe they don't want to tell the whole story, maybe they give you bits and pieces, but as much as they're willing to tell you before they have to stop themselves because they're going to get their shit rocked if they keep going, or the fear of it anyway, right? Or to take that a step further would be seeing why they have that fear. What interaction did they have? Actually directly showing the character with the antagonist that created that system of fear for that character. So portrayals to drive a specific notion, right? Both can achieve the same outcome. It depends on what you're trying to achieve, I guess, necessarily. Like, there, more often than not, I think a narrative benefits from showing as opposed to telling, just because it allows you to create a lot more significance for the viewer. Because if somebody has to continuously go through the plot beats or the elements within your narrative that are driving this perspective home, then it allows them to personally feel the weight or consequence of whatever plot beat you are trying to drive home, right? So, let me see. A good example of telling and not showing, Avatar: The Last Airbender's opening and exposition is a direct history of the fallout and proposition of the Avatar. So they could have taken you through, like, you know, the entire breakdown, him getting pushed from the Fire Nation, the entire war, things falling apart, him going into hiding, the genocide of the air nomads. But instead, the story hands it to you through the narration of Katara, who's able to give you the accumulation of the entire setup for the series, though the same way the first episode does. And it's done beautifully. It takes like 30 seconds. You get all of the exposition you need. It sets you up for the entire plot. Like, sure, could they have created significance in that exposition if they handed that to you first? Like, say they took you through scenes of the war and things like that? Yeah, maybe. But when you're entering a piece of media for the first time, you don't want a ton of exposition. You don't want a bunch of heavy lore. You don't want overwhelming world building. It's not necessary. You don't have the, I guess, relationship with the characters or the narrative in order to justify, like, stressful exposition or that level of world building. You're not invested. It's not an enjoyable experience, right? It just feels like trauma dumping. So taking you through that world first and allowing that narrative exposition to just set up the scene, and then going through the world, getting to know the characters, getting to know the rest of the narrative, and then handing you flashbacks or handing you these elements as they're important, it is a lot more beneficial to the experience. So back to showing and not telling. Establishing why telling is useful. I think that's showing, for the sake of developing your plot, right? So personal experience allowing the consumer to feel these elements within a narrative, right? I tend to enjoy it a lot more than being handed or told is significant. A good example of showing and not telling narratively is in She-Ra. So Dora and Catra go through flashbacks in the Horde under Grayscale's abuse and interaction with their childhoods. Throughout the narrative, you're handed bits and pieces of information about She-Ra, Catra, and Grayscale independently, like the ways they navigate their relationships or their experiences in the Horde, or what they're looking for, what their goals and their motives are, right? That's the general upbringing and how they set up the atmosphere for the Horde in those relationships. Like, the redemption of Adora is meant to be really interesting because she realizes that the Horde is awful and that they're doing bad things, and is like, okay, well, I can't do this, deuces. And that immediately creates an insane rift between her and Catra. So, the redemption of Catra still choosing to continue in the Horde despite knowing that they're doing awful things is derived from the ability to sympathize with her, being able to see why she still sees a reason to do it. They could have told you, like they could have let Catra monologue about why she needs this, or why she cares, or why she benefits. Like to show her intense attachment to the Horde and desire to appeal to and prove herself to Grayscale. They take you through flashbacks. That's another thing too, is like flashbacks are often portrayed as a frustrating vehicle to get taken through a narrative because it feels irrelevant to the current plot at times. Like, it can feel like a drawn out waste of space or time, right? But again, a thing that I think She-Ra does in a very interesting and useful way is that they have the characters actively, like, current day and time, walking through these flashbacks. So they walk you through She-Ra and Adora and Catra. Oh, I've been saying She-Ra this whole time. Same difference, but Adora and Catra going through their memories in the Horde and showing Catra's abuse in relation to Adora's golden child pedestal. And that direct, like, contrast of Catra fighting for Grayscale's approval and love and affection, as well as Adora's, allows you to sympathize with her. I still think she was redeemed too quickly. I don't know if that's a hot take. I wanted more time, but also I don't know that they, had the option. If we could have gotten another season that bridged that gap there. Also, did not ship Bow and Glimmer. That's neither here nor there. I'm just complaining. But yeah, so getting to feel Catra's strife and their frustration boil over, and their, loneliness, contempt, frustration, is what sets her up for a redemption arc. Because if you couldn't sympathize with her and she was just a bad person doing bad things over and over, then why would she benefit from that? And I think that the narrative telling you that, hey, Catra's childhood sucked, I don't think would allow for the same impact of, like, seeing why it sucked. Like, sure, she could monologue, or she could fight, or she could explain to other people, like, what she went through, like, why she even cares about Grayscale, despite being abused throughout her childhood, right? It was seeing her continuously strive for it and look for that validation over and over and over, that in a roundabout way justifies the things that she did. Or maybe not justifies, but it allows you to sympathize with her. To bring it back to Avatar: Last Airbender, I think another good example of, narratively showing and not telling is Azula and Zuko's relationship. I don't think Zuko talks about how he feels about Azula until, like, very late game, but it's very obvious, he does not like her. Aside from her just being a major antagonist and an actual genuine fear for the main cast, right? The story does a really good job of building up, reasons why she should be feared and why she's an actual threat. And then also showing you why Zuko, despite being a part of the Fire Nation and being a literal sibling to Azula, still fears her and still does not trust her. And then they have active conflict throughout the narrative until it escalates into one of the most impactful fight scenes. I don't even care about fight scenes. I care about that scene so much. The fight between Azula and Zuko. The author could have easily included... The author, I don't know that there's one author. I don't actually, oh my god, who made Avatar: Last Airbender? Why don't I know? I know that I think there were like 2 people who worked on the script and then pitched it together in its entirety, but I don't actually know who that was. That's crazy. Michael Dante, DiMartino, and Brian Konietzko? Michael Dante, DiMartino, and Brian Konietzko, often referred to as Mike and Brian. The creators developed the show as a love letter to Japanese anime, aiming for a mix of action, humor, and deep storytelling. So, they could have easily included moments where Zuko goes off about, like, hating Azula, or explains his trauma, around, like, Azula's torment. But there are so many instances of building up Azula as a threat, and a genuine, like, just terrifying person that it doesn't really require the exposition. It doesn't need the dialogue. Like it's just sort of a given. Granted, there are episodes that have flashbacks of like Azula's abuse and things like that show you directly just like her bullying him and sadistically tormenting him. I love Zuko so much. But yeah, that's the point, is you watch Zuko go through this entire arc of stress and grief and trauma, to the point that when he finally has this confrontation with Azula that he prepared for numerous times, learning lightning bending and actively working on his fire bending with Iroh and everything else, that by the time he has this fight with Azula, there's barely any dialogue. It's poetic, it's artful, it's beautifully done. And the fight, it feels like it straight up isn't for you. You're watching them go through this, just them unleashing years and years of pent up emotions and grief to this final sum. It's so good. It's so good. This isn't necessarily meant to be like a content breakdown, so I could have more concrete examples or go into it a little bit more, but for the sake of getting across showing versus telling. So to disembody the expectation, say you're trying to get a level of prejudice across. So telling the viewer that, like, you could have somebody explaining racism in your fantasy universe. Say you have a protagonist who is a minority and a victim of the racism in said universe, right? You could, once again, I think telling versus showing here. Telling could be maybe somebody warning them about the prejudice they could face, maybe them explaining to somebody else the prejudice that they do face and why they can't do X, Y, and Z, or why they wouldn't do X, Y, and Z in face of that prejudice. Or you can have them taken through the experiences of how that prejudice has and is continuing to impact their life, right? So, like, microaggressions, hate crimes, lack of opportunity, etc., versus them explaining what it's been like to go through that. You see and feel their hardships spat in their face. It adds weight, it adds depth, because if that is the fight continuously through the narrative and they're having to confront that, you are feeling the hurdles with this protagonist as they are going through this narrative. Like, that's why a piece of media benefits from showing and not telling, is because of the weight that it can add to the viewer. So, if something doesn't necessarily need to add weight, they just need to understand it. Like, once again, the exposition in Avatar: The Last Airbender, they didn't need you to feel the weight of a 100-year war right off the bat. They wanted you to care that there was this 12-year-old kid who had powers, right? And just trying to live their damn life, dropped the weight of a 100-year war on top of their head at the beginning of the plot. It didn't do anything for you to feel the weight of a 100-year war. But say, in the proposed narrative, where you need to feel and understand the prejudice that this character is going through in order to understand the actual conflict, telling them about the prejudice that they could experience doesn't do the same thing as letting them hit face first into every single hurdle, right? It just depends on how, where, and why you want to add depth to a narrative. And more often than not, I want to cry with the characters. I want big feelings, and I'm going to feel big feelings if I have to feel why they have big feelings. And I'm going to feel big feelings if you let me also feel and understand, as they're coming to understand these things, why stuff sucks. If you want to hit your reader, you have to hit your protagonist. Type shit. Another example of this is if it's not just big feelings, like just taking them an enthralling experience or a vivid experience. So, problem solving. A pet peeve of mine, or telling and not showing, is like, I think very often a piece of media, if it has, especially like mid to late game, because I feel like creators will write an exposition 1,000 times and then they have way less practice on later in the plot. That's just my experience. And that's general vibes, and means absolutely nothing. Don't hold me to this. This is an opinion. It becomes a lot more, again, vibes. It becomes a lot more difficult to, I guess, create and take a viewer through a narrative. Later game, like, by mid to late game, you have so much information and so many elements from your story that are supposed to come to fruition, or so much history that's supposed to come back. Like, this is, like, that's the point of a climax, is that everything comes back together. All of your main plot beats are supposed to, like, connect, right? Like, that's generally the point of a climax. So mid to late is when all of those things are supposed to do all those things. So when you have all of these pieces coming back together in a narrative and they're supposed to do something, it feels like it's often a lot easier to just have somebody hand you the information, to just explain to the protagonist and then also the reader why these things are coming together, why these things make sense. why all of this is supposed to fit together now. It becomes a lot more complicated to show how these pieces are actually coming and fitting together. And unfortunately, the only examples I can think of right now are like indie pieces of media. I read a lot of webcomics. And I don't want to use those as examples because it's like, I think that they're good. And this complication on a narrative is like not the kind of light I want to shed on an indie piece of media. I think that it's important that you consume it in its entirety and understand where things are coming from. And also, I'm just not going to spoil an indie piece of media. So a lot of people were mad that Madoka Magica just made Madoka a god. Maybe not a lot of people. So there were people that were mad. I liked it. But I get the frustration. So Kyubey, in Madoka Magica, was really guilty of explaining the overarching, like, magic elements of the plot and how everything played in together. And just taking Madoka for the worst ride of her life through this history and lore and magic system, right? So by the time everything comes to fruition, like, I think his explanation was kind of necessary that, oh, that just makes you a god now. I don't know how else the narrative, because it kind of shows you in the most beautiful way possible that she is a god now. Like, the animation, chef's kiss, fantastic. The montages. What does that sound wrong? That feels wrong in my mouth. Montages? Are gut-wrenching. Fantastic. Gorgeous, beautiful, enlightening, enthralling. I adore them. I like Madoka Magica a lot. Oh, a pet peeve of mine. So, like, later game just explaining how all of these elements are coming to fruition and intermingling with each other, as opposed to, like, showing you the fallout, showing you how these pieces are connecting, showing you, like, how these things are summed up, and continuously taking you through the narrative. Like, I think it just becomes very laborious to not just hand you the results of all of these actions and all of these things. Character interaction is what drives a plot. It becomes very difficult, or I feel like it becomes very difficult to show you the consequences of these things that is not just them also talking about the consequences, like a character-driven plot, like especially like romances or things like that. Like, of course they would talk about it. This entire thing has just been people talking about it and having problems. Again, all I can think of are like small indie pieces of media. This is not useful. Attaches a reading list in the description. It's just comics I like. It does nothing. Here's your homework. You have to like these things because I like them. I could name Nana, but Nana, the entire thing is just them telling you and not showing you, but that's kind of the point. I also like Nana. The times where it shows you instead of telling you hit so good. I love messy relationship angst. This is gonna suck so bad to edit. So TLDR. I've seen a lot of explanations of showing versus telling, but when I was trying to figure out what to do with that in relation to my own work, you know, all of it is showing versus telling. It's a visual medium, right? But it's like the effect of taking somebody through the narrative. So less words. I could tell somebody I got hit really hard, or I could fuck around and find out and get hit, and then I spit blood, and then I look really jacked up because I got hit really hard. And then I can't do a thing after that was important to the plot because I got hit really hard. Like, if I needed to do a thing, but oh no, I got hit really hard, so I can't do the thing now. That's why it matters. That's why it adds weight to the plot. Because it's like I didn't have to tell you I got hit really hard for you to see that I am now so hit so hard, now so hard hit, now so hit, now so hard hit, now so that I can't do. And then you're like, oh, that sucks. Because they were supposed to not get hit hard, and they were supposed to be able to do. That's it. If you're just, like, there while stuff happens, it just feels bigger, I think. So, like, do you just need somebody to know? Could this meeting have been an email? Did it need to be an email? Did I want to be there for the meeting? So in Mana Age, I'm definitely going to be showing a lot more than telling, like, too much. Like, probably a lot too much. So I right now, the literal current first chapter is showing you the magic system and how that works and how Marigold is navigating that and why they're navigating it the way that they are. If I do anything that I'm supposed to do with my life, is going to be talking about the magic system and how that works and why it works the way that it does. And I don't know what a spoiler is, both for the sake of Mana Age and in general, and I will talk about that. So I'm going to be showing way too much as opposed to telling, because I like it. That's it. I want to draw the pretty pictures. I'm gonna be so honest. Like, I did think about just telling you how the magic system works, but I was like, that's lame. Why would I just tell you? It's like runes and stuff. I think it's really cool. I don't know what a spoiler is. If I show it to you, then I can't spoil you for my own plot while you are reading the plot. I don't want to tell you anything too soon, so I hope it's good. I hope it's good. I think it's good. I like it a lot. I'm excited to read this. Writing is so hard. Be so nice to anyone who makes a piece of media. You are listening to me right now. I need you to aggressively support every single indie creator that you ever come across and you even moderately like their stuff. Be nice. Be nice to people. Be nice to... You get to read this, you get to watch this, you get to consume this piece of media. Somebody made this thing of their own volition in their own time. And if they're independent, do you know how hard that was? You don't. Try. I dare you. Do it. I'm very passionate about creativity. It's fueling, it's enjoyable, it's good for you. Do it. I dare you. It's so hard. You won't. Do it. You won't. You will. I believe in you. Alright, so that was showing versus telling. If you enjoyed this, and this meant literally anything, then you should maybe read my comic, Mana Age. I'm tapping the sign. And then I also, if you want to support me and the comic, and you like my stuff, you like cool stuff, it helps a lot. You can check out my shop, you can check out my socials. I like when number go up a huge bunch, so like, just number go up really good in my brain. Really good for me. Alright, thanks, don't talk to strangers, bye.